Dahoo Forest, Dahoo Doris, welcome Christmas, bring your light.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan and welcome back to Christmas in July on Every Version Ever. Last year I did every version ever of the Nutcracker, and of course every version ever is technically hyperbole, so there are more Nutcrackers to go, and I was planning on doing another batch this year. However, I also had another idea that I've been kicking around in my mind for a while. What if I did a different story every year for Christmas in July? I will get back to Nutcracker eventually, but there is another story I've wanted to do for years now, Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And for this one, every version ever is not hyperbole. In fact, I can actually go above and beyond the 3 official versions that are out there. Everyone knows about the original animated Christmas special, the live-action Jim Carrey film, and the recent animated adaptation from Illumination starring Benedict Cumberbatch. However, the Grinch has shown up in several other movies and specials over the years, and this month I think we're actually going to cover every version ever of the Grinch. Of course, kicking this whole thing off, we had to go back to the beginning, the original special from 1966. I invited several friends to join me for this one. Today I'm joined by Carmen, aka Pikachu Cat, Mark, aka The Animation Commendation, and Nicki, aka Trivial Theater, and we're talking about the very first adaptation of Dr. Seuss's Christmas classic from Looney Tunes animator Chuck Jones, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And that is just the beginning. In the next episode, the 4 of us will be back to talk about the 2 sequels to the special. Yes, there were 2 sequels. Halloween is Grinch Night from 1977, and The Grinch Grinches the Cat in the Hat from 1981. So stay tuned for all these and more all month long as we look at every version ever of The Grinch. Well, to start, I will say this is possibly the first time I've seen this. It might be the second, but was not very familiar with the original How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I remember watching some scenes of it, like obviously the song. I've seen the song a lot. I don't remember why I've seen the song so much, but not the rest of it. But watching it for this was like, I don't remember half of this stuff.
That's quite interesting.
I'm kind of the same like you. I didn't grow up with this either, so I think I've only seen it once before rewatching it for our podcast.
I actually watched it when I was a kid. They used to
Nice.
show it in elementary school during like Christmas.
I was gonna say I know the first one like it's the back of my hand, so
Yeah.
Well, I know it used to play on TV a lot, but my family didn't watch a whole lot of the Christmas specials. Like, I also haven't really seen the Peanuts Christmas special other than like once. We just didn't watch the Christmas specials. We had some Christmas movies we liked. We'd borrow from the library or that we owned. We watched Christmas movies more than we watched Christmas specials on TV. We weren't the family that eagerly anticipated the stop motion Christmas specials or the Peanuts movie or the Grinch. We didn't wait for those to air like some families did. I know my cousins did. They all loved Rudolph and Frosty and the Grinch and Charlie Brown, but my family didn't watch those much at all.
That's interesting.
well, and it goes to show you every family works a little differently in that respect too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, the Christmas special that I would watch every year, as Jonathan knows, it was Arthur's Perfect Christmas. That was what I would look forward to
Nice.
because I only had PBS, and that was kind of the only Christmas special I think I could watch.
Well, it's a good one to choose, I'd say.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it.
I would imagine watching the animation style of even the original and the sequels or sequel and prequel is quite jarring compared to like looking at something like Arthur, just because it's not a downgrade, but it is so typical of that era. You know, because you got one from the 60s, you got one from the 70s, and one from the 80s.
And the 60s one in particular is very Looney Tunes. Like, obviously this is by Chuck Jones, but like just the way it was animated, the different movements, the way the dog reacted to things, the facial expressions, it was basically a Looney Tunes cartoon.
I think I read.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. It is totally Chuck Jones in its approach.
I think I read somewhere that in the end, the Grinch and that ended up looking more like Chuck Jones than it did Dr. Seuss's actual drawing of how the Grinch looks in the book.
I thought that tonight because I decided to watch it again, and I bought the book. So I was going through the book with the special just to see how much it was the same. Because I thought to myself when I was putting this together, I was like, I bet this is going to be the first story that is word for word exactly the same with the book and the special. And I was wrong.
Oh no, they have a lot of details in the special.
I was kind of surprised at how much it differed. Like it's obviously very similar, but there was enough different that I was kind of surprised. Like different lines were omitted and little word changes. Like instead of hanging a mistletoe wreath like he did in the book, they changed it to holly who wreath. It was like that's kind of I don't know. Somebody wanted to do some artistic license, and all the gadgets. None of the gadgets that they named off were in the book, which I was surprised by because they all seemed like something that Dr. Seuss would write.
I think they had to fill the half an hour time slot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they added songs too, which the
That
songs
true.
obviously weren't going to be in the book.
Yeah.
The songs were iconic too.
Oh,
Yes.
very much.
Very much.
I would say too, like, and I guess I've never really noticed, but Googling up the Grinch and the way he looks in the movie versus the way he looks in the book. There's the shot of where he smiles, like, his hair parts down the middle and then he does this really crazy smile. Reminds me of like Gossamer and stuff like that from Chuck Jones. So yeah, I never gave that any thought, but looking at that picture, it's like, oh my God, it's totally Chuck Jones. Like the stuff that he would do.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I didn't think about that until you said it.
Kind of that deranged, like just insane smile.
Mm-hmm.
Like good deranged, but still.
And now that we're talking about it, I know we're not to the sequels yet, but like when I was watching the sequels, I was like, they really changed the look of everything. But I'm kind of thinking the sequels are closer to the book than the original was in terms of the style, like the shape of the Grinch and his face.
Sure.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Like it's still different, but it's closer to the book, I think.
Absolutely. I'd even say, and I know we're not talking about it in this episode, but the DreamWorks or the Illumination Grinch has quite a bit more look. Like it looks quite a lot more like the book Grinch than what this special does.
Yeah, it does. One thing that I was surprised looking up the voice cast, June Foray was Cindy Lou Who.
She was kind of like in everything back then.
True, but I just never would have even thought of her as the tiny Who child.
She was a talent.
It's also interesting. She looks kind of different in the book. Like I feel like, and I don't know, like the illustrations are not exactly consistent, but like the scene where she wakes up in the middle of the night, she looks, well, I read that Dr. Seuss and his wife argued about whether the Whos were humans or insects, and she looks very insect-like in the scene where she wakes up in the book. Like she actually has antenna, and then when I watched it again, I realized she has antenna in the animation too, but she also has hair, which I had never noticed before.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I was like a little bit. I think for like the longest time, I thought like she was like some sort of like an alien. Like I think she confused me as to what exactly the Whos were.
I could totally see that as an alien.
Yeah, but yeah, I also like because I read the book as a kid and I noticed the design difference, and I was like, I'm like she looks human here, and then like kind of bug alien like here, but. I don't know, cute at least in both, just when one looks slightly less human.
It's probably partially to do with the fact that the Who's, I think they originated in the book Horton Hears a Who, which I was more familiar with as a kid. And they're like minuscule. Like I think in that book they live on a speck of dust. Like it's an entire world on a speck of dust.
On it like a dandelion, yeah.
Something, yeah.
I think too in the Jim Carrey 2000s movie, they actually live on a snowflake.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if that's what that was his thinking for designing them semi-insect-like or not.
So if this takes place in the same universe, imagine how small the Grinch is.
Well, speaking of Grinch size, I also did not realize if you look at the illustrations where he's standing next to the Who's, because most of the illustrations, the Who's and the Grinch are not drawn side by side, but in the few that they are, the Grinch towers over the Who's. He is a completely different species. He is monstrous compared to the Who's.
He's a Grinch.
Yes.
Which, like, I think it's because I'm too familiar with the Jim Carrey version where they're just basically the same species, but he's like mutated and green or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
It never occurred to me that they were two different species. I just thought he was a weird green who.
I only saw that once.
Yeah, but in the illustrations, he's something else entirely. He's huge.
I would just assumed he was kind of like that Bigfoot or whatever monster that lives on top of the hill kind of a deal.
He probably is. But he also, another thing that I read while I was researching, Dr. Seuss based him on himself.
Mhm.
He
Really?
he felt like the Grinch about Christmas. Like the whole thing was he was like he saw Christmas as being too commercial. He was very anti, probably not anti-consumerism, but anti-stuff. Like he thought Christmas was too much about stuff, and he just felt like the Grinch. And he kind of wrote himself into the story.
Huh.
But you think about it, I think a lot of authors do that. Like you find that character. I mean, they always say to write what you know. And if that was where he started with that, and those were his beliefs, I could see making an analog of yourself in that form.
There's a very good biography if anyone's interested called Becoming Dr. Seuss, written by Brian J. Jones, and it's just about his life and his career, and he goes through a lot of behind the scenes on a lot of the books. And I think there was a good chunk that was about this book, how the Grinch Stole Christmas, as well as when the short was being made. And I really enjoyed the book, so I recommend it to anyone listening who wants to read it.
Well, that sounds incredible. Because anyone that can write the characters that he writes and the way that he writes them has to be an incredibly interesting individual.
It was a very interesting biography, I'll say that.
Nice. Appreciate the suggestion.
You're welcome. They're totally not paying me for this.
Although Audible, if you're listening, how about it?
Yes.
Well, I guess we could go back to the voice cast.
One of the classic icons of or Universal horror movies, which was surprising.
Yeah, like when you first hear about it, it is a surprising thing, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Boris Karloff, for those who are listening.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's like the voice of not Frosty. It was the voice of Frosty, I think. Started a really terrible horror movie called Microwave Massacre.
Who was the voice of Frosty?
Hang on, I'm gonna look it up quick.
It was that comedian's something. Something. Jackie Vernon.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, this guy, oh my God. Microwave Massacre is quite an interesting movie, and the fact that Jackie Vernon, like this voice of like children's television or children's Christmas classic, starred in this movie it caught me off guard. But that's neither here nor there. So, and not on subject at all. So I apologize.
At least Boris Karloff didn't do anything horror related.
Oh no, well this is Halloween or Microwave Massacre is on par with some of the Santa movies that I've thrown towards Jonathan. So it's more on the realm of like weird, what the heck were they thinking when they made this movie level B movies?
I see.
So out of the 80s of all times.
Well, again, not to skip too far ahead to the sequels, but there was some stuff in the sequels that reminded me of the tech from some of those Santa movies.
You're not wrong.
Spying on the children.
But those are done with a certain amount of cheeky imagination towards children. Microwave Massacre is not a children's movie in any way, shape, or form, besides there being a giant microwave that a man uses to reheat cannibalistic bits of victims. That's a different story, though. Cut that if you need to.
I think the Grinch podcast has gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna get that when you have me on. You know that. I apologize. Yeah. Oof. Sorry.
Rest in peace, the Grinch podcast. We tried.
It was a good attempt. We tried.
We'll regroup tomorrow.
Exactly. Just start the whole thing over. Welcome to the Grinch podcast. We're here to talk about the fantastic original Grinch movie from the Grinch special from the 60s and its subsequent sequels, which are in their own way, shape, and form quite interesting and not at all creepy.
Are they not creepy though?
That second one,
I'm so glad I did not watch the Halloween one as a kid. Because, like, that would have traumatized me.
I was watching that, I was like, who is this for?
That is actually a really good question. And well, with any bit of media, it's always a good thing to question that. Like old or new media, who was this made for? Was it made for kids? Was it made for adults? Was it like family oriented? Was it a weird mishmash of all of the above? Yeah, the Halloween one specifically was, I don't know how to explain that, but we'll get to it.
I mean, we probably can just skip around because I wasn't really planning on going through these like scene by scene because, well, for the Grinch, everybody knows the story of the Grinch and it's kind of self-explanatory. I mainly just wanted to talk about them just in terms of how familiar we are with them and maybe what like memories of them. Because most people, other than me and apparently Mark, grew up with the Grinch. So it's kind of strange that I never did, but I mean, I'll have a different podcast for this one. But like, I grew up with the Jim Carrey version. For whatever reason, I don't know why that was so popular in my house, but my brothers kept, I think, I don't remember if it was taped off the TV or borrowed from the library, but that one was just played all the time, quoted endlessly, the Jim Carrey version. And we hardly ever watched this one, the normal one. So I have almost no childhood memories of the actual Grinch. So I thought it would be more interesting to talk about it with people who did.
yeah.
I mean, for myself, Grinch, the '60s Grinch was a staple of Christmas. Not the book actually, which is weird, but I never like I had a couple of the books, but it wasn't ever really a thing. My first introduction to Seuss as well as the Grinch was the special.
Oh, that was the introduction to Dr. Seuss.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I probably read a couple of the books as a kid, but this is my earliest memory of Dr. Seuss, I guess.
Mm.
Or maybe just the one that stands out the most over the course of time. But yeah, I mean, the Grinch was always just there. It was never a thing where it wasn't. So I guess it was always something that I enjoyed. It was a staple. It wasn't really a question. So
Yeah, for me, I was a big fan of the Dr. Seuss book growing up. I did read a lot of them as a kid, and like I said before, the this special, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, I never watched at all as a kid. I think multiple reasons. One, I don't celebrate Christmas, so I think that's one reason. So I'm not like looking forward to multiple different types of Christmas specials to watch every year. And two, I used to only watch PBS, and that would not show on PBS, so I didn't really have access to it. And for some, I would get all my stuff from the library, like on video or whatnot. And I don't think we had How the Grinch Stole Christmas on VHS there, so I never saw it until I think the first time I saw it was maybe 6, 7 years ago. And this is actually the second time I've seen it. I'm watching it now for this podcast, so I don't have any nostalgia for this. I do think it's a good adaptation of the book. I mean, it does what it needs to do in half an hour. I don't think it's like my favorite of the Dr. Seuss specials. I grew up a lot with the Cat in the Hat special. That's one like I could like if you're doing a podcast on that, Jonathan, I'll definitely be up for that one. That one I could quote that like from beginning to end. That and like the Sneetches.
I had actually thought about doing different Dr. Seuss things for
Uh,
the podcast. But the one I grew up with, not really me. I think it was more my younger brothers, but I watched a bunch because they kept, I think maybe one of them owned it. I don't remember. We had a basement flood and I don't know what happened to all the VHSs, but we had Horton Hatches the Egg. We watched that a bunch.
hmm.
So that's the one I'm most familiar with. I don't know that we even had any books. We might have had Green Eggs and Ham, and I don't think we had any of the other books. I probably borrowed some from the library, but never repeatedly. So I didn't really grow up with much Dr. Seuss.
Hmm.
I was always aware of him, and I would read them here and there. Like if somebody else had one and I was at their house, then I would read it. But like it wasn't something that I was obsessed with. Like my favorite, as a child, my favorite author was Bill Peet, who I later found out was a Disney artist.
wow.
What did he write? Like novelizations of the movies?
No, he was a children's book author too, but he wrote,
Oh, okay.
there was one called The Wingding Dilly about this crazy mixed up creature
Wing Ding
thing.
Dilly.
Yeah. No, he had a lot. My favorites were his books. It was just supposed to be like I don't know if you would call it like a scientific journal or it was like rhyming too, so I don't know, but it was just talking about various made up animals that he invented. And that was like one of my favorite things, reading his books of made up animals. Most of his books are out of print because I wanted to buy them for my nephews and they were like $60 for one book. And I was like, oh, I can't afford that.
Oof.
But yeah, anyways, Dr. Seuss. Most people had all tons of his books, read them all the time. I didn't. It was kind of weird that my most familiar thing with him was a special about an elephant hatching a bird mutant.
Isn't that Dr. Seuss generally everything is kind of mutated from what's like the norm?
Yeah, kind of. Even his supposedly normal creatures, like the cat in the hat, it does not look like a cat.
No,
Definitely not.
the Lorax perplexed me as a kid, but
Mm.
I was thinking back on it, and when the Lorax movie, the Illumination Lorax came out, I think I was in second grade, if I'm recalling correctly.
Oh, I feel those.
So my second grade teacher organized us all to take it because she had read us like the book and we did projects on like saving the trees and stuff. And I was so obsessed with this movie that for my birthday, my mom made me a Lorax cake.
Aw.
That's
I
nice.
know, and it's just so funny thinking back on like how obsessed I was because I didn't know what he was, and it drove me a little insane that I couldn't figure out what the Lorax was. Like the Cat in the Hat was like a cat, and then they had a
Yeah.
bunch of fish characters, and sure the fish looked like mutants of cats and fish, but it's fine. But the Lorax, like I don't know, I had an emotional attachment to the little orange dude, and I did enjoy the 25-minute animated short that adapted the
Mhm.
Lorax book. I don't remember what year they made it, but that was what got me like really into Dr. Seuss, I think, was like that short. And then the Grinch, the old animated Grinch, that I also was like I did not want to watch the Jim Carrey one for like the longest time. My family always wanted to watch it around Christmas time, but I always insisted that we record the animated one because
Nice.
I preferred it so much over the Jim Carrey one. And then I grew up and I realized that the reason why I probably preferred it was because I just didn't get a lot of the jokes that were being said in that movie. They were going straight over my head.
No, I'm with you. I think the animation one's way better.
Yeah. So I had like elementary school, I think I had like a fascination with like the art style of Dr. Seuss. I think it would be safe to say.
He does have a very unique and
Yeah.
recognizable style.
He does.
Like here in I live in Orlando, so I go to the theme parks every now and then. And in Universal Studios here, we have a Dr. Seuss land, and everything is designed like Dr. Seuss. All the buildings and all the designs, the artwork is just like if Dr. Seuss himself did it, and it's like you could tell it's just so unique in his style.
His book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, is like something something like your relative gives to you when you graduate
Yeah.
Mhm.
elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. Like my
So
parents never got me it because they said it was like cliche. And when I was like in fifth grade, I'm like, I want the
Aw.
book. But they're like, no, you get a yearbook.
I remember my cousin getting it when she graduated, and I was confused. I don't think I'd ever read it, and nobody gave it to me. I'm not sure if I've even ever read it myself.
I've read it. I don't own it.
It's just so funny how like in some ways the Places You'll Go book was almost substituting for like kids' yearbooks because everybody was just signing that book.
I think maybe she did that at her graduation party too. I think they had a table set up that you could sign the book.
Hmm.
You're unlocking a long forgotten memory.
Yeah. Yeah. And then somewhere on Facebook is a bunch of posts of that party or like my fifth grade graduation, just a bunch of moms saying, oh, the places they'll go or whatever, like 15 million times. And everyone being like, oh, they're so cute. I'm pretty sure my mom did that too. Even though we didn't have the book, she would constantly always say on Facebook after like me and my brother graduated something, oh, the places you'll go. It's just I don't know if people do it anymore because like honestly, my mom's a fifth grade teacher and like kids don't really talk about Dr. Seuss anymore. Like she used to teach first grade too. So I know this because I've interacted with these kids, and they don't really know Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, I don't think
Hmm.
his books are read as much as like the other generations were. I know a lot of schools still celebrate. I think March 2nd is his birthday, and I think that's like Dr. Seuss Day. So a lot of schools, I think, still dress up like Dr. Seuss characters on
Yeah,
those days and whatnot.
yeah,
I know my sister-in-law does stuff with my nephews. They homeschool, so she has like all of their birthdays are themed around different things. A lot of times it's a book,
Mm.
and Dr. Seuss is a favorite. I know she posts something on Dr. Seuss Day, like they make a cake or whatever. So, well, I mean, they're homeschooled, so it's not exactly like a public school thing, but some kids
Yeah.
like Dr. Seuss. Probably because I suppose my sister-in-law grew up with Dr. Seuss, and now she's doing it with her kids. So it probably depends on the parents.
Yeah, I feel like if you grew up with it, you're gonna grow your kids up with it too.
100%.
Like when I was younger, I know when I say younger, like maybe in my teens, my goal, I wanted to read every Dr. Seuss book that he wrote. I think I did complete it. I don't remember.
think I tried to do that too at one
Mm,
point because I have so many. And a lot
nice.
of them are like Cat in the Hat variation books, but I remember I read Dr. Seuss for like a while, probably longer than like most kids normally would because you like eventually age out of that reading. But I just really enjoyed his writing and his art, so I would constantly pick them up in the library.
Oh yeah, same.
I even remember when I was young, I got like a Cat in the Hat book, but it was like you wrote your own adventure or something like that in the book. It's at home. I'll have to like find it whenever I go back home in like 3 days.
Oh,
But
I don't think I know that one.
yeah, it has like a yellow cover. And I just remember there's a bunch of questions inside about like yourself and then like if you were like a character in a Dr. Seuss book, like what would you be like? Something like that. I'll have to find it.
That sounds cool.
Well, one more voice that I wanted to make sure to mention was the
Oh yeah, back
singer.
to this.
Thurl Ravenscroft did the song, the main Grinch song. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. He keeps coming up on my podcast, but I'm doing a lot of stuff around his era. But I think it's funny that a lot of people don't realize that he was also the voice of Tony the Tiger for Frosted Flakes.
Bit of a tangent, but have any of you seen the movie on Frosted that Jerry Seinfeld made?
No, it's on my watch list.
I saw some stills, but I haven't actually seen it.
I like it a lot, but it's kind of it's like a fake retelling of the cereal wars between the Post Company and General Mills Company about making the Pop Tart. But anyway, Thurl Ravenscroft is one of the characters, and she played by Hugh Grant.
Really?
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
you got to see the movie just for that.
I definitely should. That's hilarious. Oh, I had no idea. I knew about the movie. I saw some pictures. I knew there was like a giant Pop-Tart mascot costume.
Yeah, yeah.
That's about all I knew about the movie.
No, it's a real. I know it got a lot of bad reviews, but like I really liked it. I thought it was really funny. But just keep in mind, it's like a fake true story.
Yeah, I knew it was fake.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a giant Pop-Tart person, so that didn't seem historically accurate. I definitely want to see it now just for Thurl Ravenscroft as an actual character in a movie.
definitely. This might be this. I could be wrong, but I think this is probably the first time he's ever been played by anybody, movie or TV show.
Probably.
I would assume
Interesting.
so.
But yeah, he wasn't credited in the How the Grinch Stole Christmas special, and I think Dr. Seuss afterwards like wrote him letters of like apologies for that, and tried to get the word out there that oh yeah, it was him who sung the song, it wasn't Boris Karloff.
Yeah, for a long time, I always just thought Boris Karloff did it, but that was before I was familiar with Thurl Ravenscroft, because everybody always talks about Boris Karloff as the Grinch.
Mhm.
So I just assumed that he sang the song too. I think a lot of people assume that. But no, it was Tony the Tiger.
Tony.
That's great.
I get the reference.
Yay.
Well, other than the song, I think my favorite part of this special is the faces that the Grinch makes. Like when
When he has
he's
an
getting
awful
his
idea.
awful idea. The way his face is animated and the huge evil smile that creeps up on his face. I just love that.
It is very well done.
Yeah. It was one of those scenes where it was like so Looney Tunes. Just everything about that style was just perfect for this.
It's like the best GIF too.
Oh yeah.
Yes, yes,
It covers so many experience or so many different scenarios in life.
it
Very
does.
much.
I was surprised by because I haven't watched this in a while. So I was surprised the animation I kind of like I was like, yeah, this holds up to like what I actually thought it was going to be. I enjoyed the animation of this one better than the other two. And I
Oh,
feel like that's just
definitely.
because
Mhm.
Yeah.
this one seems like it definitely got more budget.
Mhm.
Yes,
More
Just
care.
yeah,
yeah.
more care, like just in the movements and how they draw the Grinch, because how they draw the Grinch differs between like the three of them,
It's
and
different in all three. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so this one, the Christmas one, is obviously the best drawn Grinch, and it's just like it was so fluid. It was yeah, so Looney Tunes, and
Hmm.
it was perfect. And I'm like, we need more Christmas specials like this.
We do.
Who's the Chuck Jones of the today?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there is one. Like there are people who do Looney Tunes cartoons today, but I don't know that anyone ever has really stood out as
Stood out
like,
like that,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
And I think there are specials that have stood the test of time more recently, but yeah, there's the classics are classics for a reason.
yeah.
Very true.
Hmm.
Some of it's nostalgia and some of it's just because they're that good.
This one is both.
Oh yeah.
Even just for the song. The song is iconic.
Yeah, everyone knows
Yeah.
the song, even outside. Like I knew the song before
Yeah.
I even saw the short.
I also liked the just like the opening song
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
it too.
Yes.
The little chant, like I liked that too.
It was like perfectly encapsulating that era of Christmas.
Yes, yes. I mean, I wasn't around to see it airing, but yes.
Well, I don't think any of us were, but
Jonathan speaking from experience. He's like, back in my day.
of the Christmas media that I've seen, this seems to perfectly encapsulate that era.
Yeah, it's just funny how like people from different eras can watch it, but we all will be like, that's what Christmas felt like back then.
Hmm.
Well, I think too that it's like the Twilight Zone or any of that stuff. The best media transcends time.
Yeah.
It's
It's
as
timeless,
relevant,
yeah.
yeah, as relevant now as it was when it came out. And you could have brought it out 20 years before or, 40 years later, and it's still going to have the same message.
And impact.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
I think one of my criticisms of this short is I think Boris Karloff does a great job as the narrator. I don't think his voice fits very well when he's actually voicing the Grinch talking. To me, I don't know if it's because he's still delivering his lines in a narrator sort of way, so it doesn't really match like the lip movements of the Grinch. But every time I hear his voice when the Grinch is actually moving his lips, it doesn't seem to me, it just seems off to me. I might be the only one.
Well, and I mean, the idea is as valid as anything else, and what you hear is going to be different than what someone else hears. So, yeah, no, absolutely, that's fair. That's a fair criticism.
It probably has to do with the fact that if he's narrating, then it almost seems like the Grinch is sort of lip syncing to the narrator.
Yeah.
So if you're too focused on that, then it would seem off.
So like I kind of wish it was full narration and the Grinch we never actually see him moving his lips to anything.
That was one thing that I noticed about the book. Like the Grinch does talk some in the book, but I noticed between the special and the book, they changed a lot of the narration of the book into lines for the Grinch to say.
Mm.
It might have been a thing at that time as well, just like to have a
Probably.
completely passive experience
Yeah.
as an audience member.
It probably would have been a little off. Like I'm sure they thought it made for a better show to have the Grinch actually speaking more. But if you're like paying attention more to the book and more familiar with the book, it probably will seem a little weird. But I wasn't that familiar, so I didn't notice until I was like going through the special with the book and looking at all the differences. And then I noticed that the Grinch had more speaking lines in the movie than the book.
I think of like all of the Grinch voices. I'm thinking like the Illumination one too. The classic is still my favorite.
Mhm.
I didn't totally, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I didn't totally vibe with the other two voice actors that played the Grinch. I think it's just because they just sounded a little bit like older and they gave him like grumpy old man vibes, which I don't know. Like the Grinch does look old and he probably is a grumpy old man. Like I don't know how old he is. I don't know Grinch lore, but like
I mean, in the book, it's like 53 years, and I believe let me check to make sure, but I believe that was on purpose because I think that was how old Dr. Seuss was when he wrote it,
uh
because he was writing himself as the Grinch.
do you think after he wrote it, like the Christmas ghosts of the past, present, future visited him and were like, "You're being a Scrooge right now by writing this"?
Ooh, a Dr. Seuss Christmas Carol. Now I want that.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, Grinch would play Scrooge, of course.
I'll go pitch it, and then they'll make it all in CGI, and it'll look terrible.
Oh yes, we gotta go to a hand-drawn studio.
Let's kickstart this thing.
Well, I looked it up. It was 53 years. So the Grinch has been glowering over Whoville for 53 years, hating Christmas.
Well, good for him. Being a hater for 53 years is hard.
Yeah, he's steady. He kept at it. There's a lesson in perseverance there.
I know you get into your 70s and you start to, not be able to do as much, but if we're talking grumpy old Grinch man, I would assume closer to 70 than 50.
Well, it depends, I guess, on the lifespan of a Grinch.
That is true. That raises quite a few
Yes.
philosophical questions about the ins and outs of how a Grinch operates, really.
Yes.
But I don't know that we really want to go into those specifics because then you're making assumptions about him and his kind, and we really don't have a lot of information to go on.
We might get some letters from the Grinches around the world. So, sorry, Jonathan.
We definitely don't want to bring that to John's podcast because that would be bad.
Well, we know at least they give us some information about their biology because they have hearts that can change sizes.
Grow. Yes. Grow and shrink.
Also, I'm just gonna say what happens in the mean one. But oh God, it's like I'm sure it's probably a question that's been raised by multiple individuals over the span of the life of the Grinch generally, and I'm glad that the question was finally answered. So I'm happy about that because it kept me awake nights.
The heart mystery.
Yes. Is it 2.5 times larger? Is it 3.25% larger?
Math.
Yes.
And then when he gets a larger heart, he also gets like super duper strong. So
That's
maybe we
right.
should all enlarge our hearts and then we can get strong.
I think that's actually a disease, though. Like if you have an
Yeah,
enlarged
no,
heart,
it is.
speaking.
There you go,
It can kill you.
Christmas gave the Grinch a heart attack eventually.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
just the Christmas bonbons either.
Exactly.
I think it's like there's actually I remember way back in like middle and high school biology classes, they would teach you about this effect on the body where it's like when your body, like if you break a limb for like an hour or so, you might not feel it because there's so much adrenaline that your body's shutting off the pain receptors so you can survive. That's what happened to the Grinch.
Well, after the credits roll, he just collapsed.
Yeah, he
at
just
that dinner table.
collapses. Eventually he feels the pain like his arms and legs and that he like overexerted, but not in that moment because he had too much adrenaline.
That's right.
And the Who's had a great grand funeral for the Grinch on Christmas Day. There's a sequel that Dr. Seuss wanted.
They buried him with baubles, tags, and bags.
Oh no.
They buried him with the last can of Who Hash.
Well, there is actually a sequel, not written by Dr. Seuss himself, but authorized by Dr. Seuss's estate. And in the sequel, his heart shrinks again because the sequel book is dumb. I bought it because I thought maybe it would be relevant, but it has nothing to do with either of the sequels.
What's it called?
It's called How the Grinch Lost Christmas.
Because
Yes,
this was one that we definitely needed.
I've never heard of this before. Well, this was published last year.
Oh my gosh. No one read this, but I do remember this cover.
Oh dear God. You know what? I've already got hives from unnecessary sequels.
Okay, when I go to the library next time, I know what I'm getting.
The Grinch looks like an angry teenager.
Well, the book is about the Grinch wanting to prove that he's changed. So he's entering a Christmas contest or a Christmas tree contest to decorate the biggest Christmas tree.
No.
The rhyming is close to Dr. Seuss. It almost feels like Dr. Seuss, but it's off. And I feel like I would need to read it a couple more times to like fully figure out why, but it feels like they missed the point of the story. And like the whole thing is about him doing this contest to prove that he's changed. And then he ends up losing to Cindy Lou Who, and then throwing a fit and marching back up the mountain. And then she calls out to him, like her tree was decorated with an ornament from everyone in town, and she has space for one more. And then he's sorry that he threw a fit, and he comes back down, and his heart grows again. Because when he lost the contest, his heart shrank.
Interesting.
That sounds quite petty.
Well, technically,
I mean,
guess
he's
the
a Grinch.
Grinch is pretty petty.
Yeah, point taken.
I don't know. I felt like there is potential for something else in this world, but it didn't need to happen. And the story just felt off somehow. Probably because it wasn't written by Dr. Seuss himself.
I could see Illumination making a sequel to their movie if it had been
This does feel like
more.
something that Illumination would do, actually. Maybe they still
Yeah.
will.
I mean, we got 4 Despicable Me movies, so.
And 2 Minions
Yeah.
Was it 3? 3 Minions is.
Oh, God.
I lost track.
Really?
Wait,
I
Is
lost
there
track.
3
I thought
Minion
it was-
movies?
Is it 2 or 3?
I think it's 2.
Let me check.
I don't know.
It's gonna bother me again.
You know,
We don't
when
talk
did the-
about Minion.
when the Despicable Me 4 trailer came out, my friend sent it to one of our group chats, and I'm like, I already saw this movie, and they're like, Carmen, no, this is a new movie, and I'm like, I watched the trailer, and I'm like, I literally could have sworn to you on my life that I watched this movie because it looks like the same formula and everything, and I'm like, I could have sworn you there was already 4 of these, and I saw this like.
Okay, it's only 2 Minions
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
for now.
Oh, when I looked up the book, The Grinch Lost Christmas, it's funny, a headline popped up saying, "We regret that the Grinch appears to have lost Christmas in a forthcoming sequel."
Well, don't worry. By the end, he regrets his actions. His heart grows again, and he finds Christmas.
I'm glad he learned that lesson the second time.
Sometimes people need multiple times to learn lessons like that.
That's true.
That is technically true.
That's a big lesson to have to learn twice. I'm just saying.
Maybe it should have been the Grinch sees a therapist and then
No, we stick to Christmas trees. It's all about the Christmas trees, and
Grinch
you know.
sees the Christmas therapist.
There you
I
go.
fixed it.
Now I'm just imagining one of the little insect who's with a giant Grinch lying on a giant couch with a tiny little Who therapist writing notes next to him.
Yeah, it's basically Jiminy Cricket.
Kind of.
We are describing the intro scene of the Grinch 2 trailer from Illumination.
There you go.
There you go. I like it.
And we thought of it first, so
That's right, gosh darn it.
send the royalties this way.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone have any final thoughts on the actual Grinch movie before we talk about the sequels?
10 out of 10.
Nice.
It's excellent.
Yes.
It holds up like a lot of stuff from the 60s. Like the Batman series from the 60s. It holds up.
Speaking of which,
Exactly. No, it's fantastic. It's very well done, and yeah, no complaints.
I remember for whatever reason, I wasn't that fond of it when I watched this the first time a few years ago. I thought it was a little overrated, and I'm not 100% sure why, but upon this rewatch, I say, no, it is actually a pretty good film. I don't know why I didn't think that before. I wouldn't say it's like, oh, I'm gonna watch this like every year, but it's between the buckets of good and bad, this is definitely a good one.
I will say this, and I think it's generally of just anything really. It's like Christmas Story. You watch that, like, at least as a kid, if you watch it, you grow up with it, and I use the Christmas Story specifically because that's what I have as an example. I talk to people that watch it for the first time as an adult, and that's not the sentiment. It's very much it's fine. It's mediocre. It covers the bills of Christmas stuff, but it's really not that great. Just that difference in when you saw it, the nostalgia that you attach to it. I think with all that stuff plays quite a big role, especially when you're talking Christmas stuff.
Well, I think we will pause here for now. We will be back next time to talk about the little-known sequels to The Grinch. But until then, do you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you? Carmen?
Yeah, I post mainly on Instagram, so you can find me over there. I am Kiki_doodles, and I mainly post my photography and sometimes art.
And Mark?
Yeah, you can find me on my blogs. I have two blogs. First is the Animation Commendation at theanimationcommendation.com. I post animated film reviews, top 13 list, and I run my own game show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Animation Edition, so you could check it out there. And I also have My Live Action Disney Project at myliveactiondisneyproject.com, where I'm trying to watch and review every single theatrically released live action Disney film ever made. I've been doing it for over 10 years, and there's still more to do, so feel free to check that out. Thanks.
And Nicki?
You can find me on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide array of random, obscure, and straight up bad movies. Stop by, grab some popcorn, and grab a seat for some weird outside the box movies.
Okay, well, we'll see you next time to talk about some weird outside-the-box Grinch movies. Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My Linktree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.